Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Bug Watch. I'm coming to you from the wonderful Costa Dorada in Spain. I was in Barcelona at the weekend at a GT, my first ever international one. It was an absolute blast. If you want to hear about that, I'll be on next week's 6++ show talking about it with Aaron, who also came. It was an absolute belter of an event, and I've got a great list from that event to talk about. Unfortunately, it's not my one. But the chap who played it amazing and put a lot of thought into it. So you'll definitely want to hear about that. Cool. As usual, like and subscribe. Tell me all your thoughts in the comments, and let's get on with the lists. All right. This is the second week of 10th edition that we're going to be talking about right now. So let's get on with it. So this is the list I just spoke about. So this is Chavo's list. You know, and I know I can't pronounce that surname, but he was a super cool guy. He came third out of 59 players. He scored really strongly, right? So we obviously know BARBED are pretty broken when it comes to secondary. So the biggest challenge we have is primary. Now, primary was tough. There was 11 knights at this tournament. So they all have OC8 or more if they're a big knight. And they're going to come and sit on your objective and go, yeah, this is mine. Unless you get several monsters on it. A lot of our monsters have OBSEC 5, but some of them OBSEC 3, OBSEC 4. So, you know, you've got to do your maths to get up to beat an armature. And that's kind of what Chavo's done here. So this event was Tormented de Hostias in Catalonia. His characters were a Hive Tyrant with Alien Cunning, so you can have redeploy some units, and the Swarm Lord. So real CP management here, really kind of nailing down, getting off what he needs to get off, but also disrupting his opponent's plans. And we'll see that a lot when we go through the list. It's really, really strong. Obviously, we've got some really cool synergies here with the Hive Tyrant in terms of all the weapons become assault. So if you really want to take the fight to your opponent and add D6 to all your monsters' movement and still shoot, you can do that if they're within 6 of the Hive Tyrant, which is super nice. So yeah, battle line, none of that. No thanks. We don't need it. And then we just go to other data sheets, other BARBED sheets. And, you know, I've given it away here, haven't I? Really, this list, the biggest thing in this list, really, or the cool kind of focal point, alongside both Hive Tyrants, is 2 BARBED HIERODULEs. Really cool. At first, I kind of poo-pooed these. 305 points each. Nah, I can get like nearly 3 Haruspecs for that. But they're doing some work in this list, and I've got a bit of a deep dive on it on the next slide. We've got 2 BARBEDs to do the mission, 2 Haruspecs. Really interesting here. I think what Chavo's going for here is the toughness 11 over toughness 10. Obviously, going into a meta full of knights with rapid fire and battle cannons, which are strength 10, having these guys over something like an exocrine actually just keeps them alive a lot longer. The exocrines toughness 10 with 10 wounds. The Haruspecs is toughness 11, so it just knocks it up. That makes them that a little bit harder to kill. I think exocrines in this list would have been quite cool because you could reroll the ones to hit with the guns from the Hierodule, but the Hierodule's guns are so. They're not as good as it's fighting. But it does add value at actually having a gun. Haruspecs is obviously a big threat in combat. It'll get anywhere near your opponent, and it can do some work. It can kill chaff, but it can also kill vehicles with its claws. So that's really cool. You got the Maleceptors as well here. So Maleceptors, you know, creeping up there in my estimations in terms of really strong units to have in your army. Obviously, they've got a pretty good mini, like a las cannony effect. It's only 18 inches though. But the ability to -1 to hit within 6 inches is really strong. And if you've got 2, you're taking up a whole lot of the board with that aura buff, debuff. I found it very useful against some the Yinkan, for example, at the weekend. But having 2 seems actually pretty cool. Not much is going to, you know, if anyone wants to engage with your army in combat, they're really going to have to work for it. A Pyrovore, which we'll go on to later as well, and a Tyrannifex. Just a big Mr. Tough Boy. Strength toughness 12. Oh yeah. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, we've got a lot of toughness 12 in here as well with the BARBED HIERODULEs as well, which is pretty cool. So the other thing that's we talked about playing the primary before. So playing the primary, sitting on objectives. obviously knights are really, really pretty strong at this. And having 8 obsec on an objective is obnoxious. If it was 5, you could maybe get away with it, just have a monster and a couple of bits. But I think what this list does quite well, I did spy one of Chavo's games where he literally crowded an objective so heavily that no one could even get near it. He wasn't actually playing knights at the time, but it was just, I thought that was a really cool way of doing it, is literally body block anyone from getting anywhere near the objective. This is his objective and he is keeping that objective. He actually took down 2 Eldar players with this list. I think only one of them had a Wraith Knight, but the other army was pretty, it was pretty strong regardless. And he took down 2 Space Marine players, and I think he drew, or maybe he drew one of the Eldar players. I can't remember off the top of my head now, and he also played Chaos Space Marines. So he did miss knights, the lucky git. It looks like Aaron got them. He got 3 knights at the weekend. So yeah, I got 2. And yeah, and that's kind of the list. I think it's really strong. I think you can walk up the battlefield and kill people. I think it can also play quite passively and just sit on objectives and go, well, I'm just going to fire spore mines everywhere. You've got to do something. Giving your opponent, getting ahead of your opponent in that way of just saying, look, this is my game unless you actually come and actively engage with me. And by the way, if you do, you're going to get debuffed by the Swarm Lord for any CP that you really want to use. You're going to get debuffed by the Maliceptors. I'm going to take away the cover saves that you get when I shoot you with the Pyrovore. And Chavo did say to me that was actually something that was really strong for him, was that just removing that cover save is just, it's essentially saying, hey, would you like another pip of AP? Sure. Especially in this very low AP game at the moment, having an AP there is really, really valuable. So I hope you agree, this is a very cool list. So what I want to talk about the most on this is the Barbed HIERODULE. So the Barbed HIERODULE, is it helping us in these tougher matchups? So I think when I spoke to Chavo, he really actually built these in against Eldar because he thought Eldar was going to be the biggest faction taken. And one of the things that it was flagged was obviously 18 wounds is pretty good against even 2d6 mortal wounds or devastating wounds. And it is, because obviously 2d6 won't take out one of these units, and you can drop the 5 at feel no pain on it. You do that, you maybe taking up to up to or around a third of those wounds away from the damage. And actually, these things kind of look pretty tasty. You might not even bracket it. So, pretty smart. If you're playing up against one Wraith Knight, which Chavo was, you're putting yourself in a good position there. Obviously, he's got a 2-up armor save as well, which is pretty handy, and toughness 12. Now, the toughness 12 is quite good again into knights. So, battle cannon strength 10, thermal spears strength 12, thermal cannon strength 12, shield breaker strength 12, and these are all regularly seen weapons in the army. So they're all wounding on, the change of going from 11 to 12 is massive for those guns. The obviously I said before, its gun is fine, like it's decent. Obviously 2 damage is probably like, I wish that was 3. But one of the things I think I missed when I first looked at this data sheet was actually it has 2 biocannons, it doesn't have 1. So that's 2d6 plus 6 shots going with blast, going at whatever you shoot it at. So super cool this, because again, you have that flexibility of fighting whatever you want to fight. You can shoot this at a vehicle and get through some shots. You can shoot it at a unit and actually clear a lot up with the blast profile, especially. Again, against vehicles, one of the problems is you are wounding on 5s. That strength 9 is a bit of a rough one. And that's why I love EXOCRINES at the moment, but I think having too many of them is a bit rough, because strength 8 and 9, etc., just doesn't quite do what you want it to do. And then AP2 is pretty good. Hits on 3s, range 48. Like it kind of does really well. But then it has this other ability, this other rule. So we'll just skip down to where it says overgrown barbs. In your shooting phase, after this model has shot, select one enemy unit, excluding Titanic, so not amazing against Wraith Knights and Big Knights. Basically, that unit is suppressed and they're -1 to shoot you. Man, that's so good, right? Like, so he's got 2. The Barbed HIERODULE's got 2 of these guns. You shoot them with different units. If you were against someone who has loads of guns and shooting at you, or or you're going to get charged. I mean, even in Overwatch, that's pretty sweet, right? Like, you could really do some work with that. So it's a really cool little tech piece, even into something like, a Armiger with Melter 4 running at your face. You know, it's maybe 6 inches away and you're just like, oh God, this thing's going to do loads of wounds to me. If you can debuff it, like you absolutely would. So yeah, and then we look at melee. So the melee, 8 attacks. It wounds knight, all knights on 3s, I think, all knights. Maybe not the really big one, but either all or most knights on 3s. And it's fairly reliable damage. It's none of this D6 plus 1 malarkey. It's D3 plus 3, back to those good old days from 9th edition. So I'm a big fan of this this monster in terms of fighting a knight in combat. So overall, is the Barbed HIERODULE going to help us in the tougher matchups? I really think it is. I really, really think it is. And yeah, I'm certainly getting one at the moment. Hopefully, I'll be taking 2 to the next week's team tournament. All right, next list. Guillaume Buchkremer. He came 3rd out of 28 players, losing 1 game, I believe, to knights. I can't see my notes because I'm actually in Spain at the moment, and I can't see my second screen. This was at the Luxembourg Open. So very cool. I think this was the one that Manny Chima won. All right, let's look at characters. So we've got Hive Tyrant with Adaptive Biology. Big fan of that. Neuro Tyrant with Alien Cunning. So Neuro Tyrant's interesting. I'm not sold at the moment, but obviously did very good work for Guillaume here. We've got Alien Cunning, so we can have that redeploy as well. We've got loads of battle line. So in comparison to the other list, it just shows you we've got certain flexibility when it comes to building our lists, which is exactly what we want as Tyranid players. We don't want to be net listing, or we don't want to be, I mean, this shows net listing, but you know, we don't want to just be taking the same list all the time. You want that flex. We've gone for 10 gargoyles, so get right up in your opponent's face, move, lock them in. Again, super nice against knights, against especially the smaller ones. And because they take up so much space, you know, if you block a path past them, you know, so the big knight can walk over them, but it can't land on them. So, you know, that can really do some nice move blocking. 10 harm against the stage and then probably do the same afterwards, or maybe score tactical objectives if you're not taking fixed objectives. You should take fixed objectives. He's got PYROVORES in here. And then looking at the other data sheets, we've got 2x5 barbed gaunts. So I wasn't a big fan of barbed gaunts at the weekend. I think there's so many vehicles at the moment that they just I didn't get the value I think I wanted out of them. But maybe Guillaume got something better out of them. I mean, it's 50 points and you get 5, and they're quite, you know, reasonably big bases. So D6 shots each. Again, something else that's quite nice about them, to be fair, is D6 shots each, and you're auto wounding on 6s if you're against vehicles, because you'll take the lethal hits ability. So that is quite nice. We've got 3 PYROVORES instead of the 2. I think you've just got 1 for the extra redundancy, just in case one dies. If they've got out of line of sight shooting, they blow one up. You're like, oof. But personally, I prefer 2. We've got an Exocrine, we've got 2 Lictors, we've got a Maleceptor, a Pyrovore, a Trigon, 3 Tyrant Guard, and 2 squads of Zoanthropes. So it's quite funny. This is a bit of a shopping list of units, right? You're just sticking loads of different things in there, and that's, I think, what Tyranids kind of want to play, and I think how GW wants everyone to have their armies anyway is not really to spam too much stuff, but to have like a shopping trolley of units. And I'm inclined to agree with some of the decisions that Guillaume is built in here. So I'm going to talk about Exocrines and PYROVORES on the next slide. But when we look at, you know, we've got 1 Maleceptor. So, you know, if you're against combat army, maybe you can position it so that that's going to debuff them. You got 2 Lictors in there as well. I love the Lictors with the rapid ingress stratagem. You just come in and, you know, if someone leaves an objective open, you absolutely savage it. It's great. Trigon as well is going to do the same thing for you, taking an objective away from your opponent. We've got Tyrant Guard. So the Tyrant Guard, I'm unsure what they go with really, because you've got 5 up, feel no pain on the Hive Tyrant anyway, so they must go on the Neuro Tyrant. Maybe the Neuro Tyrant's going up the board and flaming things. Maybe that's what the Tyrant Guard are there for, to keep it safe. I haven't played enough games with it to really tell you how I think that goes, but for me, I'm not entirely convinced. And then the 2 squads of Zoanthropes. The Zoanthropes are amazing, but they're made a lot better by the Exocrine and the PYROVORE. So let's talk about them for a second. So Exocrines and PYROVOREs are really cool, really good units. But I would describe them as non-spammable. I took 3 at the weekend, 3 Exocrines. And while it was really great having 3 monsters all stand near a Hive Tyrant, run up the battlefield and shoot stuff, it's limited in its strength. So it's really good against elite infantry. But if they haven't got elite infantry, it kind of mostly bounces off knights or does menial damage to them. you could have took something better to do that damage. And I think that's where I am with them at the moment. So why are these units great? These units, after shooting, give all your rest of your army a benefit. So you've got the EXOCRINES. When it hits something, you get to reroll ones against that unit with the rest of your army. So that gives you a 16.6% efficacy increase, according to Reddit. Sorry, I didn't have time to do the maths. Reroll ones is good. We all know that, right? Cool, sweet. And of course, the Pyrovore will remove cover from an opponent. So we know how valuable AP is in this game at the moment. Basically, getting an extra AP is super good, and should always be thought of. I was probably a bit slow on these, but I definitely will look to include them in my lists going forward. So how do you get the most out of these units? Obviously, target priority is very important here. You need to know what needs to be removed, because these guys are like gonna grease them up for getting removed. They're gonna get the lube on them and just absolutely tear them away. I can't believe I just said that. And so we obviously want to pick the unit. We need to have these models also ready to point at like a key objective that your opponent wants. So if you know that there's an objective they consider safe, is there an angle you can get where actually it won't be safe, or you can pop out through a building, especially with the Pyrovore, because it can move through walls because it's infantry. Is there a way you can actually deploy in such a way that actually you spring the trap on them, so to speak? And then, of course, the number one thing is you shoot these first before you shoot anything in the rest of your army, and then everyone else will get that benefit. So, should you include them in your list? I really think so. I think an Exocrine and a Pyrovore should be a staple. Should you spam them? Absolutely not. I think there's enough regarding the Pyrovore. I think there's enough anti-infantry stuff in our army to actually stop us doing this. Whereas the Exocrine, I just think the strength isn't there to actually deliver really, really, thank you, really, really strong damage to a vehicle heavy meta. So I would kind of lay off spamming them, but definitely having one in your list is really, really good. Obviously, your opponent can focus them down and say, right, well, I need to kill this first. Not necessarily the worst thing in the world if they're shooting an Exocrine at the back of your board and while the rest of your army gets up there. So to summarize, put them in your list, but don't put too many of them in. Cool. Thank you, as always, for listening to me garble on about Tyranids. If you have any questions or any comments, please put them in the chat, in the comment section below. Come and join our Discord, ask questions, drop your list in there. I'd love to discuss them with you. And yeah, I'll be telling you about, we have a few events next week. I'm going to try and do a book watch every 2 weeks now, given that lists are a little bit less adaptable, a little bit less customizable. So I figured I'll just show you the best lists every 2 weeks, and then I'll drop in other episodes with other interesting bits that I think I want to share. I'm at a Teams tournament in 2 weeks' time. I'm very excited for that one, and I can't wait to talk to you about my list and how I've gone around building it. It'll be taking a lot of inspiration from Chavo's list. So yeah, big thanks to him. Cool. See you next time, guys.